Welcome back with a smiling face. Important note before starting, if you are a fan of audio stories, then our Patreon account is the best platform for you. Join us on Patreon for the best audiobooks ever. His Revenge. Episode 10. Chapter 73. Missy. As I heard Maddox move to Lee's door instead of mine, a figure appeared at my window. Glass broke, and the bars were pulled out, a face replaced them. A man who didn't look much older than me crawled in through the window as I retreated, eventually pressing my back against the wall as I tried my best to get far away from this strange man that I knew wasn't here to rescue me. Once he was in the room, he grinned. "Warwick isn't going to need you anymore. I can do whatever I want to you now," he said, licking his lips and rubbing his hands together. "Get away from me," I said, my voice wavering as I tried to think of what to do. "What's going on in there?" Maddox said, linking me again. "Just get my mom out of there." "Is there someone in there with you?" he asked, an edge in his voice I'd never heard before. The vampire crossed the room so fast that I barely saw him move. He grabbed me by the throat, slamming me into the door. "What is going on in there?" Maddox roared from outside the room. "Get my mom!" I yelled out, my words choked as I gasped for air and tried to push him off me. "Don't worry about me. Get her out." "No. Help Missy!" Lee screamed from her cell beside mine. "I'm here!" Liam yelled from outside the door. "Get Missy first!" Lee screamed again, her voice becoming hoarse. A cry of pain followed almost immediately, and then Lee went quiet. I could hear Maddox arguing with Liam, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. My focus was on the vampire pinning me to the door by my throat and trying to loosen his grip so I could breathe again. "Maybe if you're a good girl, I'll keep you as a pet," the vampire said, his grin widening as he looked me up and down. "A nice collar would suit you well, and I can pass you around the barracks down here to keep up morale." A cold chill traveled down my spine as he suggested that I become their slave. The implications of his words made me want to vomit, and my knees almost buckled. The only thing keeping me standing was the fact that I was being held up. His free hand brushed my cheek and then slowly down my body as he leaned forward, licking from my neck up to my ear. "Should I name my new pet, or do you want me just to call you my BH?" he whispered, his voice cold but entirely serious. "F*K, you," I gasped through gritted teeth and with little air. My vision was starting to go black. I regretted stopping Liam and I's training now. Then I remembered. I reached above my head with both hands, clasping them together, and brought them down hard on the vampire's elbow joint. It bent and loosened his grip, allowing me to finally breathe. I changed my mind about training with my dad, but on those runs with Maddox, he'd stop and play fight with me. I always thought it was innocent, but now I realized he was trying to prepare me since I wouldn't let them. We'd play fight, and he'd pin me down until I got frustrated with him. He always took mercy and showed me how to get out of his hold. Turning away from the wall, I threw myself at the floor while holding onto the vampire's arm with both of my hands. One of my feet went to each of his hips, and as my BT hit the ground, I kicked him up and over me. He skidded across the room, slamming into the wall. Maddox called that one a suicide throw. I stood up, massaging my throat, still gasping for air. "I'm not anyone's pet. I am Missy Blackfur, daughter of the Alpha of Blood Eclipse. I wasn't going to be a victim here, and I wasn't going to be one for this monster." My wolf was howling and ready, desperate to be let out. She wanted to tear this guy apart. "Okay, Holland, he's all yours." Maddox. The sound in Missy's cell stopped, and my wolf was in complete overdrive, trying to break free to get to her. I heard talking, and then a large thud like something hit the wall, followed by the sound of a wolf growling. She shifted. I need to get in there, I thought, desperately trying to find a way to get into her room as I only barely paid attention to Alpha arguing with me about who to get out first. When he heard Missy shift, he looked at Luna's cell and yelled, "Aelia, I have to get Missy first. I'm coming for you, please hold on." Alpha immediately started hitting the door with solid punches, over and over. Unlike when I tried to break the door down, it was moving every time he hit it. As we heard more snarling and the sounds of fighting inside, I jumped in to help by kicking above the lock, trying to break the door free from its frame. The door began to buckle as I became increasingly angrier at my inability to protect my mate. Boom! The door fractured, sending us both lurching through the door frame in surprise. When we looked up, we paused, mouth agape. I thought Missy was in trouble, but she was covered in blood, but it didn't appear to be her own. A vampire was backed into a corner of the room while she tried to find her opening. He was swiping impossibly fast at her to keep her at bay, but she was relentlessly attacking him. Wounds were evident on his arms and leg, with part of his left hand missing entirely. He looked at us as we broke through the door, terror written into every inch of his face. His eyes then darted towards the window, presumably trying to figure out a way to escape now that the odds were even further out of his favor now. Maddox. I can't finish him. He's too fast, she linked, hearing our entry. Her voice no longer sounded scared but determined. It probably wasn't the time, but it was incredibly attractive to hear her so sure of herself and see her holding her own. Let me have him, I said, happy to end the vermin trying to hurt my mate. Missy paused her assault, stepping back to survey her opponent, and he immediately bolted for the window. As he started to climb through, she caught him by one of his legs, sinking her teeth deep into the muscle. He screamed, turning around to try to hit her. She whipped her head furiously to the side and released her grip on his leg. The vampire was thrown towards Alpha and me. All yours, she said, turning her head hard towards me. Her obsidian fur shined from the moonlight streaming in through the broken window at the top of the room. Tom broke through like water bursting from a dam, and I shifted in the air as I leaped to meet the creature who dared to touch my mate. My teeth found his neck, and I ripped my head in the opposite direction Missy had thrown him. His head was dashed into the opposite wall as it was pulled from his body, blood splashing the ceiling. I landed in front of Missy, shifting back and putting my arms around her, instinctively trying to protect her from anyone else that would try to hurt her. Her soft, blood-soaked fur became even softer snowy skin under my touch, and she melted into me, her head tucked under my chin. She clung to me in a way that made me want to hide her somewhere so no one could ever try to hurt her again. Her skin against mine sent a ripple of pleasure across my body. Get her out of here! Alpha bellowed as he ran from Missy's cell to Luna's. You need to help my mom, Maddox, Missy said, looking up at me, her eyes fierce with determination. I have to let Alpha help your mom, you're my priority right now. He gave me an order, so, I shrugged and picked her up. I couldn't let her fight me to stay here, it was too dangerous. I can walk, she yelled indignantly. But you won't, and you know it, I said as I hurried from the room. As I sprinted down the hallway, I almost barreled right into a large group of wolves coming down the tunnel. Where is Alpha? One of them asked, not bothering to shift back. He's back that way, I said, pointing towards where I'd left him. He sent me away to get Missy out of here. I need to get her to Dr. Ron. Is she okay? He asked, his head tilting in concern as he took in the sight of her over my shoulder, naked and not happy about it. I'm fine. Let me down. Missy yelled, hitting me in the back. Split up, he said, looking around at the group. You three go with Maddox. Thank you, I said, grateful for the help in getting her to safety. The wolves split up, and the three ordered to stay with me ran ahead, leading the way. Luna's scream pierced the otherwise quiet of the subterranean network, and the rest of the wolves darted towards her. Luckily, there weren't many vampires on the way out, and the wolves made quick work of the few that did appear. Once we got outside, the fighting was still raging, but the wolves were clearly winning. I have Alpha's daughter. I linked broadly to my pack members on the battlefield. Help me make a path out of here. Without reply, the wolves started attacking with more fervor and driving the vampires away from the path to the forest. We can only hold them in place for so long, get her out of here. Sean bellowed, his voice breaking through the myriad of internal war planning I was doing to figure out the best way to get Missy to safety. As soon as I heard the command to go, I sprinted like a runner with a starting pistol. I don't know how fast I ran, but the expanse of the estate's grounds surrounding the house passed by in a blur. It was not time before I was through the trees and laying Missy down on Dr. Ron's already prepared table in his medical tent. I took the blanket that someone shoved in my hand and laid it over Missy to cover her since her clothes were in tatters in the cell where she shifted. Liam. I ordered Maddox to get Missy to safety and ran from the room. I didn't spare the dead vampire another thought as I rushed to the next door that was keeping me from my mate. Aelia. I called loudly. She replied with a stunted cry. I could feel her pain and panic. Gavin was close to snapping. Hang on, I told her through the door. With a sharp inhale, I chambered my leg and push-kicked the door right above the lock with all my might. It almost completed buckled with just one blow. Azalea's whimpers could be heard more clearly now. Liam, she called weakly. A second blow blasted the door open. I was instantly inside, and I could smell blood, my mate's blood. Aelia was in the corner of the room on top of a small, dirty blanket. I could see blood below her legs. She was pale, and cold sweat beaded on her skin. Liam, she said, squeezing her eyes shut and holding her round stomach. Before my name had finished leaving her lips, I was by her side. I grabbed her face in my hands, checking her over. Are you hurt? I asked quickly. The baby, she groaned. I need to get you to my uncle, now, I said. Voices sounded behind me from the doorway. I can't, she trailed off. She looked like she was ready to pass out. When she wasn't clenching from pain, I could see her tiny frame shake. Alpha, we need to move, one of the wolves said behind me. There was no more time to lose. With Aelia bleeding like this, the baby needed to come out as soon as possible. As gently as I could manage, I eased my arms under her knees and behind her back. Pulling her to me, I lifted her into my arms. I'll move as gently as possible. Hold on, I told her as I turned toward the doorway. I could hear the hurried footsteps of dozens of people that didn't smell like wolves. They were coming back for us. Alpha, they're all running back inside, get out of there. Sean called to the pack from outside. The sound grew louder and closer with every passing second. I turned towards the wolves waiting with me and standing guard in the hallway. I want a closed arrowhead formation around Aelia and me. I can't help you fight, but I need your help to protect her and get to the medical tent. Everyone around me nodded their assent, and in unison, they started to move outside. Aelia screamed, her hand digging into my arm as I felt her entire body tighten from her pelvis outward. "Breathe, baby, I have you now. We're going to get you to Doc, he's going to get the baby out and make sure you're both okay," I said, drawing her closer to me as I walked sideways out the door, careful not to hit her with the door frame. "I'll keep you safe. Just help the baby," she panted, her head falling into my chest with exhaustion as she tried to catch her breath after the contraction. "Both of you, Aelia." "Both," I growled through gritted teeth. I wasn't willing to compromise on this one. I'd fight the moon goddess if I had to. Everyone shifted as I stepped into the tunneled hallway, and they formed a wedge-shaped triangle in front of us as they closed the reed with a solid line. The rear line was 6 wolves wide with 2 rows, and there were 10 wolves in front of me forming the tip of the arrow. This formation was created to protect the alpha in war, with the extra wolves in the rear protecting my back and filling in if anyone fell in the front. I looked out over their backs, and I saw them. The vampires were flooding the tunnel, blocking the view of the end. Surprisingly, there were also vampires crawling on all fours on the ceiling towards us like some perverted spider hybrids. It reminded me of a horror movie. "Go!" I bellowed, giving the signal to move. Paws sprang into action all around me as we moved in a practiced tempo towards the coming onslaught. We met the front line with an audible collision as both sides growled and snapped at the other, the scent of blood soon pungently permeating the air. The arrowhead formation worked as designed, with the wedge-shaped front splitting the massive group in two as it forced the group down each side of the formation into the waiting jaws of a wall of wolves. We moved quickly, but the vampires coming from the ceiling slowed our movement. Our formation didn't account for that. Gavin was screaming within me to let him protect our mate, and our combined frustration exploded from me in a roar. The wolves stopped in their tracks, but so did the mass of vampires, several falling from their perch on the ceiling. It reverberated so hard that I could feel the floor beneath me shake, and the wolves around me swelled as if it strengthened them. As we started to move again, the vampires didn't seem to be as set on dying for their cause. I began to wonder if Warwick had some degree of control over his kin like an alpha does his pack. Anytime they were surprised or frightened by extreme violence, it seemed to break them from their trance-like actions. Without command, we all moved as one again, breaking through the line like a hot knife through butter. Soon, we found the stairway in the room where Damian and I fought Warwick a short time ago. Damian was there, fighting a group of vampires of his own. They fell from the second floor above right into the fray while Damian and the other wolves tried to keep them at bay. He was covered in blood, and I started to wonder if it wasn't just Warwick's. "Go!" Damian's voice cried out from over the sound of death all around us. "Get her out of here." "I'll come back for you," I told him. Our formation had lost wolves, but we closed ranks. We pushed through to the front porch and finally to the grass outside. The vampires were stopped by the combined forces outside as they swallowed our group and let us through while holding off the dwindling number of vampires behind us. "Finish them," I linked to those outside as I continued sprinting to the forest. "Don't leave any of them alive. We can't let them go out and make another army." Finally, I could smell Missy, Maddox, and my uncle. I'd made it. Aelia let out another scream, and Doc ran towards us to meet me before I could get to him. "This way," he called as he stopped and turned back the way he came, now running at my side. He was looking over Aelia as we moved. I didn't like the look on his face as his eyes moved to my arm, where her blood was coating my skin. "What?" I growled. "Is she bleeding?" he asked as Aelia stifled a scream. I nodded, unable to bring myself to say the words. "Aelia, how long have you been bleeding?" he tried to ask her as we made it to an enclosed tent. Missy held the flapped door open, and I breezed right inside. "Argh!" Aelia cried, her eyes squeezed shut. "Place her on the table," my uncle instructed. He moved over to a wash basin, quickly sterilizing his hands. I gently placed Aelia onto the table, one of her weak hands still feebly squeezing at my arm. "Liam," she whined. "Liam, I can't feel it." Chapter 74. Aelia. I couldn't feel the baby. Just pain and panic. Was Missy okay? Did Liam and Maddox get to her in time? What about all the fighting? Was anyone hurt? "Aelia, I need to know how long ago your contractions started," I could hear Dr. Ron call out calmly to me. "Liam," I whimpered. "Liam, I can't feel it." I pried my eyes open and looked up into his face. He was filthy and naked from all the fighting and shifting. He had blood on him, but I didn't know if it was mine or someone else's. One of his eyes was brilliantly blue while the other almost black. Gavin was sharing control with him. "It's okay," Liam mollified, trying to sound calm. "Doc is here, and we're going to help you both." Liam's large hand pushed the hair back from my face that clung to the cold sweat covering me. "Where's Missy?" I asked desperately. "She's safe, little Luna. She is with her mate," Liam told me. I could see the restraint in his face, I could feel his panic adding to mine, but he was keeping himself together. "Save the baby, Liam. You have to save the baby," I pled. "You are both going home from here, little Luna," he tried to assure me. I looked over to Dr. Ron, who was coming over to the other side of the table. Liam laid me on with scissors in his hand. "You have to save the baby. The baby is more important," I implored. "I'll do everything I can, Luna," he said as more pain radiated through my body. Another person I didn't recognize stepped up beside Liam. "I need to get in her now," she said. He stepped over closer to my head but didn't step away. Another person began hanging some draping at my chest, blocking my view of my body and Dr. Ron. "What is going on?" Liam growled as the draping rose above his head as well. "Nephew, their best chance is me getting this baby out now. I need to cut her open. Step foot across that draping, and by Damian's orders, you will be removed." Dr. Ron yelled forcefully. I felt a prick, then a bit of warmth. Heaviness settled into my body, but I couldn't actually feel anything. Tears were running down my face. Fright filled me being. I didn't want to die, but I was more afraid my baby wouldn't make it. I closed my eyes and tried to swallow the thickness in my throat. "Luna, I need you to stay awake," the woman nearest to Liam said. I opened my eyes as Liam began slowly patting my hair back away from my face again. He leaned down, resting his forehead on mine. "Stay with me, baby," he said softly. "Don't leave me." "Liam," I breathed softly. "Missy, Mom," I cried softly. Liam disappeared inside the tent with Lee in his arms, followed closely by Dr. Ron. When we arrived in the tent, Dr. Ron checked me quickly as Maddox told him Liam was coming with Lee. Just as Dr. Ron was clearing me to go, someone linked Maddox that Liam was close. Dr. Ron ran from the tent, and one of his nurses handed me some clothes. I pulled them on quickly while Maddox held the blanket up around me to give me a little privacy. As soon as I was dressed, we left the tent only to see Liam running toward us. Lee appeared limp in his arms. I held the tent door open for them. As soon as I let it go, Maddox wrapped his arms around me from behind. All the emotion and stress of the last week were crashing down on me all at once. I wasn't going to be weak, but I couldn't fathom Lee or the baby dying either. He did this. He helped them, I sobbed. Maddox had his head leaned against the back of mine. My hands covered his as he gripped me tightly around my waist. He gave them information. I know, Maddox assuaged softly. I could hear an edge in his voice. He got my brothers taken and all of us attacked. I said louder now. He can't hurt you now, Maddox told me. Why? Why would he help them? My dad could have helped him. He will never touch you again, Maddox promised. My mom. How could he do this? He was the only one who got it. I was a ranting mess now. Everything that was bottled up in the cell was coming out. Everything I couldn't say out loud was pouring out of me. What did I do? Weren't my parents enough? Now my family too. Maddox loosened his grip but turned me around to face him. His hands came to the sides of my face. Vlad won't ever hurt you or anyone else again, Missy. She can't die, Maddox. I can't lose another mom. She doesn't deserve it. She is the best mom. The doctor is going to do everything he can to help her and the baby, Missy. Junior and Leo can't lose their mom. They are just kids. And Liam. He would die without her. She's our glue, Maddox. She holds us all together. I know, sweetheart. I know. He wasn't patronizing or mad, he was just letting me vent. I felt like I was going to burst. Everything inside of me felt like a storm, and the only one who could calm it was my mom. Maddox pulled me close to him, laying my head on his chest. He wrapped his arms around me tightly, and I did the same to him. His lips came to the top of my head, kissing me gently. Let it all out, he said quietly. I closed my eyes and breathed in a shuddering breath. Cedarwood and citrus flooded my senses. A relieving calm swept over me like a warm blanket. Small, pleasurable tingles began to pepper the skin of my arms while I hugged Maddox's bare torso. The storm broke, and everything inside of me felt like it was falling into place. Mate, Holland cooed. I pulled away from him abruptly. Maddox, I said disbelievingly as I stared at him with wide eyes. His hand came to my cheek, and I felt the tingles, the mate bond. I told you, he said before he bent down and kissed me. His kiss was deep and passionate. I closed my eyes and let myself lean into his embrace. His lips moved over mine, and I felt my wolf rejoicing. Maddox was my mate. It was him all along. Maddox is my one, and I didn't want to accept it. But here he was. He rescued me, he got me away from the vampire. He came through a battlefield and saved me from vampires. His lips parted from mine for just a moment. I looked up into his brown eyes, dazed. I quickly snapped out of it. I launched myself at him, jumping up into his arms. He caught me readily as I wrapped my legs around his waist and my arms around his neck. I planted my lips against his once more in a hungry kiss. Maddox was my mate. He obliged, kissing me back with just as much energy, his hands running up and down my body. I didn't want to think, or worry, or breathe. I wanted him. My body suddenly craved him entirely, I needed him. Before we could pass out from oxygen deprivation, Maddox pulled away from me. I want nothing more than to mate you right now, sweetheart. But there is a battle raging only a few hundred meters that way. I nodded my head, trying to control myself. Is it safe to say you accept me as your mate? His face turned up into a smile. Shut up and kiss me, I said, returning his look. Liam, stay with me, little Luna, I chanted. I rubbed her head over and over, trying to keep her eyes on me. Her eyes were fluttering, and she was growing whiter the longer my uncle worked. "What's taking so long?" I called, tearing my eyes away from her for only a second. There was no reply, just bodies moving around the table on the other side of the draping. I turned back to Aelia, whose face had grown calm and relaxed. "How are you feeling, baby?" "I can't feel anything," she hummed, her voice barely audible. "Uncle," I called, terror spiking again. "Baby is out," he called. He lowered his voice, and I could hear frantic directions being given to the people helping him. There was no crying from the baby like there had been with Leo and Junior. "Is it okay?" Aelia asked feebly. "We'll know in just a second." "I am sure the baby is just fine," I told her, not confident in my own words. "The pup, the pup, the pup," Gavin repeated over and over. He wouldn't come until we laid eyes on our pup. Finally, someone stepped around the curtain, blocking our view of Azalea's lower half, holding a bundle of blankets. "Congratulations, Alpha, Luna. Say hi to your baby girl." My heart completely stopped as my eyes traveled to the small hole in the bundle where a tiny face was peeking out. Her eyes were closed, and she looked to be sleeping soundly. The nurse carefully passed my daughter to me. "She will need to be hospitalized as soon as we get to the pack. We need to run tests and watch her, but you can hold her now," the woman told me. I slowly turned to Aelia, her droopy eyes straining to look up at the bundle in my arms. I leaned down and brought the baby close to her face. "She's perfect, just like her mother," I said softly. Aelia smiled softly, sweetly. "She's okay," she whispered. "You did it, little Luna. You did it," I told her. Her eyes fluttered all the way closed now. I waited a moment for her to open them, but they didn't. There was frantic movement, then a long, monotonous beep sounded. When had they hooked her up to any monitor? The same woman who had handed me my daughter pushed me back from the table as I cradled my pup tightly. "What's going on?" "Aelia, open your eyes," I called. "Liam, Aelia is in distress," my uncle shouted in a calm tone. "We need to get her stable and back to the pack. We can only do so much for her here." Missy appeared by my side, Maddox only a step behind her. "Give me the baby, Dad," she said. She stood tall and confident, holding her arms out to take her baby sister. I looked down at the precious bundle in my arms. My body was torn. I had my pup in my arms, and she could remain there where I knew she was safe. But Aelia was in distress, and I needed to be with her too. "Stay with Mom. We'll take the baby. If you are here with her, she will be fine," Missy said. I nodded my head before gently handing over the baby. She held her sister tight and turned around to leave the medical tent, giving space again to the team working around my mate. I stood there at a loss, not knowing what the right thing was right now. "Nephew. You need to end this battle. Get everyone out of there. I need hands to get your mate back. Get your beta and the other alphas that have come to help you," my uncle commanded. His entire demeanor was naturally authoritative. He may have never wanted to be an alpha, but leadership ran through his veins. "Don't let her die," I growled. I turned on my heel and torpedoed from the tent. Missy and Maddox were right outside, huddled around the baby. I took off past them, sprinting back to the battlefield. "Those filthy blood bags will pay for taking our mate," Gavin roared. I completely agreed. I let him take complete control as I stepped back into my mind. I shifted mid-stride and quickened my pace back to the estate grounds. When I broke through to the opening, the battle was clearly waning. Damian, I tried linking him but got no response. Gavin targeted us at the now destroyed front doors of the large house. The taste of blood soon coated our jaws as Gavin ripped through vampires remaining in the fight. Too many wolves lay on the ground wounded or not moving, but far more of those lecherous creatures laid next to them. I leapt, clearing the stairs of the porch easily, but I skidded to halt as I reached the doorway. Langston, with the help of 3 other wolves, was carrying a large body. "Liam," Langston called. "It's Damian." My heart paced, and a growl escaped my muzzle. "We don't know what happened, but we need to get him to the medical team now," Langston yelled. I nodded my head. I turned around, and Langston knew immediately what to do. They lifted Damian's massive size over my back and draped him lying face down. I was the best bet at carrying him out of there quickly. I let out a long howl that the other alphas of our force quickly mirrored. The message was clear: end this now. The vampires may not have been as stupid as we thought, because as I stepped out of the large house through the fractured doorway, I could see them trying to make their escapes. Langston and the others pushed past me to lead the way. We moved at a quick pace but not fast enough. I listened closely to Damian's breathing and heartbeat. It was ragged at best. I prayed to the moon goddess that I hadn't gotten my best friend bitten or killed while my search for Aelia blinded me. The other alphas were soon flanking Langston and me as we charged into the trees towards the medical tent. As we approached, I noticed a large clearing to the side of the tent that was now full of wounded wolves being attended to. I was so focused on Aelia previously that I hadn't noticed at all. There were so many. Maddox ran up to us on our approach. "Alpha," he said quickly. "Damian needs help now." I linked him. He nodded and dashed over to the tent, calling inside to my uncle. Another man exited the tent, blood all over his front. "He's the beta of Blood Eclipse. Our alpha just carried him here," Maddox was saying as they both quickly strode over to use. Everyone around me shifted back to their human forms so they could lift Damian from my back. The doctor Maddox brought had them lay him down on the ground. He looked him over quietly for a moment. I shifted back and was handed a pair of shorts for the first time since the battle began. Finally, the man looked up at me. "Alpha, I think he may have been bitten." Chapter 75. Get Theodore now. I roared as we pushed into the clinic's doors. Everything was ready for Aelia and Damian upon our arrival. Damian had the foresight to make sure that transport was arranged for Aelia and Missy to extract them from the field hospital that was built. With some quick adjustments, we were able to get Aelia and Damian out of there. Langston took command of things to clean up and get the wounded out. "Liam!" I heard Lily scream. Her eyes were locked on the stretcher holding Damian as it was pushed past her. "Lily," I said, my voice choking. I had to tell her I got him hurt. We had always come back from every fight we were in relatively unharmed, but not this time. I rushed over to her, grabbing her before she could chase after her mate. "Let me go," she screamed. "Lily, you can't help him right now. What did he do for you? Why is he not talking?" She was jumping and kicking around in my arms, desperately trying to get free of my grasp. "Lily, please calm down," I begged. "Liam, what is wrong with my mate?" Her shouts were devolving into strangled sobs. Her movements lost force as she started to crumble. She was feeling it, the pain was plaguing her bond with Damian. "Damian," she cried. I sank down to the floor, still clutching her. She grabbed her chest, and her breaths were heaving. I knew her pain. I was feeling it every second. Aelia wasn't okay. "Lily, he was bitten." My words tasted like acid. "My best friend, my beta, the man who was always there to help clean up my mess. I got him hurt because I couldn't protect my mate and my pack. How could you? Lily sobbed. You're supposed to keep him safe. He's your best friend. I'm sorry, I said. Lily sat in a chair with her head in her hands. Her sobs were quiet, but I knew she was still crying. I stood, leaning against a wall with my arms crossed over my chest in an attempt to keep myself still. It had been over an hour since Damian, Aelia, and the baby were taken back into the clinic. Aelia and Damian needed serious medical attention while they wanted to run tests on my pup. I sent Missy and Maddox to the pack house, telling them to shower and eat. Missy refused to let anyone check her until Aelia and the baby were okay. She seemed fine and wanted to be with Maddox, so I didn't push the issue. Austin came in earlier to tell me that Felix and my father called to check in, but I couldn't talk to them right now. Missy and Maddox entered the clinic waiting room holding hands. Her eyes swept over Lily first before landing on me. Dad, she said softly. She came over to me, dropping Maddox's hand and hugging my midsection. I hugged her back. Any word yet? My daughter still looked tired and thin, but her hair was wet, and she smelled clean. Nothing yet, I said softly. She held on to me a moment longer, lingering. She let go and went back to Maddox's side. He looked better too. Missy wore an oversized sweater, so I couldn't see if there was a mate mark on her yet, but I didn't think so. Her scent hadn't changed yet, although I could smell Maddox on her. Maddox pulled her over to one of the chairs, and they both sat down, waiting like Lily and me. I closed my eyes, reminding myself to be patient, that my uncle wouldn't let anything bad happen to them. What seemed like hours later, someone emerged from the back of the clinic holding the baby. Missy shot up and rushed over to her. The nurse smiled as she passed the baby over. Alpha, Mrs. Hale, would you like to come back? Lily and I both bolted to attention at her words. Lily practically ran past her, ready to get to Damian. I followed the woman back, trying to keep myself calm. Missy gave me a passing glance. We'll take care of the baby. Get Mom, she linked. When we go to the back, Damian and Lily were in the same room, with machines hooked up to their bodies. Time seemed to stand still as we stopped in front of that little window. My uncle joined us. They are both in comas, he said quietly. Lily suppressed another sob as her hand came to her mouth. We both watched our mates through the room's window. Damian was bitten multiple times during the battle. Unfortunately, we don't know by who he was bitten, so we don't know what effect it will have on him. With Theodore's help, we were able to extract some venom from his system. We drained a large volume of blood and transfused him with clean blood. But I cannot say when he will wake up or what side effects he will face. Lily looked green. My chest was tight, not just for my mate but for my best friend and Lily. You can go in and be with him, my uncle told her. She nodded her head before she pushed the door open and went to Damian's side. I watched as she grabbed his limp hand in hers before dropping her face to his chest and sobbing harder than ever. We couldn't hear her cries from outside the room, but I could feel them. And Aelia? I asked. She lost a lot of blood. The circumstances of her labor were far from ideal. There was a lot of damage when you got her to us, he said sadly. Will she wake up? I croaked. We are hopeful, but that is up to her. We have done everything we can to fix her physically. If she does wake up, she will have a long healing process in front of her. We can only monitor and hope for now, he said. He rested his hand on my shoulder as I clenched my fists at my side. I'm sorry, nephew. We stood like that for a moment, my eyes glued to my mate lying in the hospital bed. She looked so small and fragile. Her usually pale skin was almost translucent, her hair a dull halo around her head. Sit with her. Your proximity can only help. I have released the pup, but I want to see her every other day for some follow-ups for the next couple of weeks. Your mate is incredible, Liam, your baby is seemingly perfectly healthy. Maybe having you and the baby close will stir Aelia awake. All I could do was nod my head. I was rooted to the spot. My chest felt like it was ripping, shredding from the inside. I got her back, but I could still lose her. My uncle left me standing there, staring into the room. After a while, I willed myself to move. I entered the room that smelled like sterilized air, not like Aelia, or Damian, or even Lily. I came to Aelia's side and took her cold hand in mine. Her fingers didn't even flinch. I knelt beside the bed, ignoring the chair altogether. I'm so sorry, Aelia, I whispered. This is all my fault. I should have found Warwick and ended him before any of this could have happened. I should have listened to my dad and sent you and the kids away. I took too long to find you. The words felt raw coming from my mouth. Everything hurt. I leaned my head down over our hands. Please wake up. Please wake up and be okay so I can make up for this, I begged. Please don't leave me. Aelia, I can't survive it. You have to wake up, baby. My voice was barely audible. Hot tears fell from my eyes and landed on her cold hands. You have to come back. Our kids need you, baby. Our daughter is so perfect. She looks just like you, she's got your hair and freckles. She is so small and perfect, just like you, Aelia. You can't leave us. I didn't even know what I was saying anymore. All I could do was beg for her to come back to me. I needed her and Damian by my side. I wouldn't be even 10% of the alpha I am supposed to be without them. Missy. Maddox and I sat in the waiting room. I held my baby sister gently in my arms. Lily and Liam went back to their mates. I didn't know if I would even see my dad again tonight. What is her name? Maddox asked me. I don't know, I said, knitting my eyebrows. I don't think Lee and Liam ever picked a name. What would you name her? Maddox asked me. He sat in the chair next to me with his arm resting gently around me. His face was over my shoulder, looking down at my baby sister. I am not sure, I said honestly. How do you even name a baby? My mom told me that her and my dad fought for her entire pregnancy over my and my sister's names. She said as soon as we were born, she just knew what name suited us both when she looked into our eyes, Maddox said gently. The baby was asleep in her blanket. The nurses had cleaned her up since we arrived. I could see a soft, white onesie peeking out of the blanket. She had milky skin like Lee, and there was a small splattering of red freckles over her nose. She had wisps of red curls on the top of her head. I should probably ask my dad what her name is, I said. Maybe you can just pick something to call her for now, Maddox said. She is your baby sister. You have Junior and Little L, maybe you can give her a nickname. I feel like she needs a real name before a nickname. We were both quiet for a second. Finally, I had to ask him. Maddox, you don't want to have pups right away, right? He let out a breathy laugh. Miss, we haven't even finished high school. I just rescued you from a battlefield. Pups are the furthest thing from my mind right now, he said before planting a soft kiss on the side of my neck. I shivered a bit at his touch but was relieved by his answer. let's get over the hurdle of mating and marking before anything else. So, what happens now? I asked him. I don't know. The acting alpha is hurt, and your dad doesn't seem like he is fit to take back over for the moment, Maddox said. I sighed and leaned back into him a bit. Let's just wait for Liam. We can watch her right here. I nodded off in Maddox's arms while holding the baby. I woke to Maddox whispering in my ear, "Hey, Missy. Sweetheart, wake up." I stirred and quickly realized I was still holding my sister. Don't panic. I didn't let you drop her. I didn't mean to fall asleep, sorry, I said, embarrassed. It's all right. After everything, I am sure your body needs the rest. The nurse just brought me this, though, he said as he held up a bottle of off-white liquid. The baby needs to eat even if she isn't asking for it. Okay, so do we wake her up? I asked. He didn't have to answer, though, because the nurse came back with a pillow and some burp cloths. She had some food while we were checking her over, but she should be eating every few hours, the nurse instructed. Okay, I said. Should someone go get my dad? I helped Lee with Leo when he was a baby but not when he was less than a day old. I felt a bit nervous. Let him stay with his mate for now, the nurse said gently. She helped reposition me to hold the baby and feed her. We jostled her gently until her little eyes started to blink open. For the first time, I saw how brilliantly green they were. She was like a carbon copy of Lee. We put the bottle to her lips, and after some coaxing, she began to suck gently. The nurse watched for a minute as she closed her eyes but continued to suck. She needs to eat at least half that bottle. We would be happiest if you can get her to eat all of it, she told us. I just nodded, watching the baby closely. Do you know how to burp her? Yeah, I think I remember, I said. I'm just a shout away if you need any help, the nurse said before leaving us alone again. Maddox watched me feed my baby sister. If Liam stays with Lee, what do we do with her? I asked him. Did they prepare a nursery? I don't know. Maybe? I am sure we have things left over from Junior and Leo, though, I said. There had to be a bassinet somewhere in the pack house. I know Lee had some clothes washed and folded in a basket in her closet. She never really did the nesting thing pregnant women do, but I suspected that might have been partly due to being told not to walk anywhere. Why don't we take her back to the pack house and take care of her tonight? We can bring her here in the morning and let your dad spend tonight with your mom, Maddox suggested. The thought made me nervous. I was admittedly feeling tired already and knew newborns woke up every couple of hours. I'll help take care of her. You can get some sleep, Maddox said, reading my thoughts. She doesn't seem like a very fussy baby anyway. I smiled at him over my shoulder. We can both take care of her, I said. He gave me a half smile before leaning forward and kissing me lightly. The baby drank the whole bottle of formula and burped easily for us. When she was done, she was sleeping soundly again. Maddox took the bottle, pillows, and burp cloths to the back, finding the nurse that brought them to us. She prepared a bag for him and sent him back out with everything we would need for the night. When he came back out carrying the green diaper bag with yellow giraffes on it, I couldn't help but giggle. He helped me stand without moving the baby around too much, and we headed to the pack house for the night. Yeah, I'll send some pictures to you as soon as we hang up, I assured my grandmother. When she called the day after we got home, I talked to her because Liam was still glued to Lee's bedside. Now I was the one who always answered their calls. Okay. I'll talk to Dad and have him call Grandpa. Promise. We finally got off the phone, and Maddox looked up at me from his spot on the bed. He had just finished feeding Aelia while I spoke with Felix and my grandmother. We had been home for a week now, but there was still no clear consensus on them coming home. I smiled at Maddox as he gently played with Aeslia's little ginger curls. We had been primarily taking care of her. Liam barely left the clinic. Lacey was helping us as well, but the baby fever was strong with her, and she would break down in tears after a couple of hours because she missed Felix so much. We named her as well. Aelia. We couldn't keep referring to her as the baby, although Sean had taken to calling us the Princess's Blackfur. I hoped Liam and Lee liked her name. She was definitely too young to know it yet, though. I couldn't explain how I knew what to call her. I was feeding her one morning, and it just came into my mind. Austin knocked on the door. He was acting alpha for the moment because Liam didn't seem to be able to make any decisions. "What's the word?" he asked me. I sighed. Felix wants to come back, but that could be made motivated. I know he is calling Lacey almost daily, and she is slowly getting worse. My grandfather thinks they should stay away until we find Warwick again, I explained. Well, there has still been no sign of the vampires coming back to his estate. Theodore hasn't checked back in for a few days now either, Austin said. I bit my lip, and Maddox looked up at us, also worried. "Anything new from Dr. Ron?" he asked. Austin shook his head. We were all desperately waiting for any change to Damian and Lee. No one could explain why Lee was still asleep, and no one knew what to expect from Damian. All we could do was wait. "Maddox, can I talk to you for a sec?" Austin asked him. I looked in between them questioningly. A look was passing between them, and I wasn't sure what was going on. "Hey now, I am helping run this pack. Whatever you two have to talk about, spill," I demanded. Maddox had a grim look while Austin looked nervous. Austin swallowed before answering me. "Vlad wants to see you. He is still locked up because no decision has been made about his punishment." I froze. His name had not been so much as uttered since we got back. I saw his face in my nightmares a few times. I always woke up sweating, heart racing, and freaking out. Maddox would wake up instantly, hug me close, and calm me down. "No," Maddox said simply. "She isn't going to see him." I snapped out of my frozen state. "Wait a second," I told him. "You can't make that decision for me. Like hell you are going to the prison to see the one responsible for your family being torn apart." Maddox almost yelled at me. His eyes were dark. "I am going to let you two talk," Austin edged out awkwardly. "Maddox, you can't tell me what to do. You aren't going down there, Missy. He is directly responsible for those bastards taking you." I narrowed my eyes at him. I didn't disagree, but I wasn't going to let him just order me around. "There is no discussion about this. You are not going to see Vlad. End of story." He stood up and took Aelia to her little bassinet in the corner of my room. He tucked her in and turned on the little mobile before storming out of the room. I threw up my arms in frustration. Maddox and I sat at Lee's desk eating dinner. We didn't talk about our fight earlier, so things were a little tense. Aelia was sleeping soundly in the little bouncer we put in here. This is where Maddox and I were doing our share of the pack duties. Austin wouldn't go in Liam's office, and it was still mostly in shambles anyway. I idly watched Aelia as I picked at my food. She was an eerily perfect baby. She never fussed or cried even when she was wet or hungry. We could care for her on a schedule, and she would just go along with it. She would eat until the bottle was gone and then sleep. We had to wake her to feed her most of the time. "I'm sorry I yelled at you," Maddox finally said, pulling my attention to him. "It's all right," I said, even though I was still upset at his reaction. "Missy, he told us everything. For 2 years, he gave information to that vampire, and you were a target. You can't go down there and give him the pleasure of talking to you," Maddox confessed. I set my utensils down and grabbed his hand. "If you don't want me to see him, then ask me not to. Don't command me, Maddox. I am your mate, but I don't have to listen to your word like law." "I know, I am sorry. I don't want to boss you around. I just see red with him, sweetheart," he said. "I am not sure I could face him right now, anyway," I told him. "But it has to be my choice. We have to have a conversation, okay?" "All right," he agreed. Austin rushed into the room. "You guys, come quick," he said. "What's going on?" Maddox asked quickly. "We just got a message from Warwick," he said. My eyes went wide. Abigail rushed into the room behind him. "Give me the baby," she said quickly. She scooped up Aelia so Maddox and I could follow Austin. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, heading outside, Lily burst through the front door. "Missy," she called quickly. I spun around and looked at her. "Come quickly. Aelia's awake." Epilogue/Prologue. Liam. The soft, consistent beeping of the machines was turning into a monotonous nightmare. It seemed that Aelia and Damian were in sync because their machines just beeped to the same rhythm over and over. Lily and I were taking turns leaving the room, but only about once a day. It was unspoken, but one of us always remained in the room. Nurses would come in and push food toward us, but neither of us were eating very much. I sat by Aelia's beside, continually praying to the moon goddess to give her back to me. Gavin was a pitiful moping mess in my head. He went from pained howling to overwhelming stress about Aelia and Aelia to bitter silence on a constant loop. All I could feel was an icy fist clenched around my heart. If Aelia didn't open her eyes soon, it was sure to shatter. Missy was an angel, bringing Aelia to see Aelia and me every day. Gavin wanted our pup, and I wanted her as well, but every time I held her, my body ached for Aelia even more. If any of our children were the spitting image of my mate, it was Aelia. Missy had even picked such a perfect name for her. After everything we had been through over the years, I had never felt this way when Aelia wasn't conscious. Scared and worried, sure. But I have never felt this cold defeat that was endlessly clawing at my chest. The longer she slept, the further I sunk. The same thought had been playing on repeat since we made it back to the pack. What if she doesn't wake up again? I sigh heavily for the millionth time in only a few short hours. My eyes wander over her soft, sleeping form for the 100th time this hour. Aelia looks so calm and peaceful, like she hadn't been kidnapped and given birth in a medical field tent outside a raging species battle. While she was forever pale and small, her surgical scars were slowly healing. My uncle said that was a good sign, her body was functioning well. Damian had also healed of all his cuts and bruises except the bite mark, that still lingered. Theodore had done everything he could to remove the venom from Damian's system, but I had not seen him since that night. It wasn't safe for him to stay within the pack right now, not after everything that transpired at Warwick's estate. "Aelia, sweetheart, please wake up," I whispered into my hands that held her limp one. She was cold, no matter how many blankets I put over her. I picked her small frame up from the bed most nights and set her over me to sleep. What was beginning to scare me the most was the diminishing feeling of our bond through our touch. Every time I touched her, the indicative sparks of our bond felt weaker. I laid my head on the bed next to her, closing my eyes and letting the vexing sound of the monitors fill my head. What if she doesn't wake up again? What if she doesn't wake up again? What if she doesn't wake up again? This is the end of second book. Third book is, His Revenge to Restitution. Synopsis. A war has begun. Aelia has regained consciousness but Damian is still in a coma. Blood Eclipse must decide how to end the vampire threat now that Warwick has escaped their clutches. The vampires won't be eliminated so easily. Can Liam protect his mate and family, help his best friend, and destroy the vampire bent on revenge against his family? The rest of the audiobooks will be uploaded in the next episode. Join us on Patreon to listen to more unlimited audiobooks.